off unless you're speaking in the discussion time. And just a reminder that you can share any question that you might have for Masuma in the chat field on the right, and then we'll just save that and keep it for when we go into discussion at the end of the event. And if you feel comfortable doing so, you can also change and or add your pronouns next to your name. And you can do this by right-clicking on your name in your video thumbnail. And just a note that CFAT reserves the right to ask anyone to leave the space for discrimination, violent acts, or any behavior that may make others feel unsafe or uncomfortable. There will be multiple moderators this evening to review the comment section, so please feel free to message Courtney or CFAT staff directly within the meeting if you're experiencing anything that is making you uncomfortable. So it's now my pleasure to introduce to you our guest and featured speaker for this evening, General Khan. So General Khan is a local artist and community organizer, born and raised in Jabuktuk, Mi'kma'ki, Halifax, Nova Scotia. For General Khan, poetry is an expression that is tied to her cultural practice as a Pashtun woman. She is currently working on her first album, Wrath of Khan, to be released in spring 2021. General Khan is currently the Center for Art Tapes artist in residence, and her style of art is influenced by her lived experiences such as white supremacy, colonialism, displacement, racism, Islamophobia, disability justice, and so much more. Please join me in welcoming General Khan Masuma with any of the reaction emojis that you like. I like the party emoji or the hand clapping emoji. Yeah, light up. Oh my gosh, that makes me so happy. Masuma, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor. It's my first artist talk, so I'm a little nervous, which is kind of weird for me, but I'm really happy to be here.
Why don't we start off by situating people in our conversation, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on while you're artist in residence.
Yeah, so I'm working on my first album, which is called The Wrath of Khan, and it's going to be 8 to 10 tracks. The subject matter goes through a lot of things. It's basically the inside of my head and all the things that I've been dealing with for a few years. But some of it speaks specifically about the loss of identity, displacement, what it means to understand how I came to understand what it meant being on Mi'kmaq territory and what it meant that I was so far displaced from my own lands that I ended up here through colonialism. Album also touches on white supremacy, the kind of violence that I faced while I was at DAL and in my current community organizing capacity, the ideals and hopes and wants and dreams I have for the world, my own I guess experiences with racism and disability. I'm disabled. It's not visible, but it's definitely been a challenge when being in spaces when people don't take the opportunity to get to know you. They just assume. I also talk about my obsession with Adidas, which is, if you know me, that I'm always wearing something Adidas. In case you needed proof, I'm rocking shell toes and an Adidas fanny today. I also have a song called "The Last Dragon," which is an ode to 80s cult classic film, which I grew up watching with Bruce Leroy. Catching bullets with his teeth. That's a movie that's really close to my childhood. So I wrote a whole song just based off of movie dialogue and pieces that relate to my own story. So in the song, I'm the last dragon. And I also have a song that talks about my parents. It's funny, I was talking to my dad yesterday and he was saying, your album, what about your album? And I'm like, what about my album, Dad? And he's like, your album's about your family. And it's true. I have a song called SMS, um, which could be like stand for message, but it stands for the sun, the moon, and the sky. And my dad's name means sun, my mom's name means moon, and my sister's name is sky, which is a message to me. And so in that song, I talk about what it's like growing up, with your parents like separating at a young age, and then seeing them eventually come back together in a point where they were both healthy in each other's lives and came together to support their kids and do what they needed to do to co-parent, and talk about some of the battles that they faced and the reasons why things were the way that they were. So for me, the Wrath of Khan is the wrath of all my feelings, frustrations, and especially the Wrath of Khan. I think I do have a song where I talk about specifically, I talk about my experience at Dalhousie, and the kind of disrespect and demeaning environment I dealt with, where my institution essentially uh, allowed me to be disciplined for a personal Facebook post where I wrote hashtag white fragility can kiss my ass and hashtag white your white tears aren't sacred, this land is. So I had some words for Dal in one of my songs too. So the Wrath of Khan is just my experience, my hurt, my sadness, my happiness, my anger, and so if you listen to it, you'll feel the Wrath of Khan. Yeah, that's kind of it.
I want to circle back around to talking about maybe some of your experiences coming up against like those structural, really large systemic forms of racism and Islamophobia. But first, I want to focus sort of more on your album. And I wonder if you could share with us the process. Like, what is your process? What are your influences? What's your approach to making this album?
My process. Well, my process is when you're in it's weird. Processes are weird in general. I feel like nothing's linear. Because every song is different. Every lyric I come to is in a different way. Usually sometimes it'll just be like a two-liner in my head and I'm like, "Oh, I should write this down." And other times it's like 16 bars come to you at a time. My process is I write at least once a day. I try to write at least 16 bars of rap. That's a good practice for any up and coming rapper. Just so that you, even if it's not the best work you've done, at least you're building up your writing, right? So for me, my process around this album, most of it was written at Alter Egos. Around a coffee and community, and um, some of it, was written in a very emotional state. I remember the song I wrote for my parents. I wrote that at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, and I just wrote that and was bawling, crying because I was processing my own emotions through my lyrics. Um, but they were flowing out so quick that it was hard to catch on to them while they were, just happening. Um, but in general, I find that my process is based off of what I'm feeling in that moment. And I thought, it's funny. We regret to inform you how this like speaker session is like on failure. I thought it was a failure for a minute because I had a hard time writing about happy things. And every beat I heard, everything that I heard, I wanted to talk about racism. I wanted to talk about what happened to Santina Rayo. I wanted to talk about liberation. And I started thinking like, oh my God, am I like this like woke rapper that everyone wants to be. And then on the other flip side, it's like I'm also a visibly Muslim, like hijabi rapper. That's not, you don't come across that every day. And if you do, there's like two other, and they're in the States, but I haven't seen any in this part of Turtle Island. Um, and so I felt like maybe I would receive more backlash for my community for taking these steps to do what feels right for me. But I think the biggest thing that helped me with my process was my parents actually encouraging me. I don't know who told my mom, but someone told my mom, was like, she was like, "Oh, so you rap?" And I was like, "Oh, how did you find out?" And she was like, "Somebody told me." And I was like, "Well, yes, I do. I do rap." And my inspiration for my rap comes from, I guess, like classic hip hop. I'm super influenced by like 90s rap and early hip hop. The first hip hop song I ever memorized in my life um, was a Slick Rick song, because I love Slick Rick. And when I used to go to this art program by the Youth Art Connection, which I stopped going to because it was really problematic, um, they used to call me the hijabi Biggie because I can do the Biggie flow, which is really different. So they encouraged me, my friends encouraged me to do hip hop karaoke at the Seahorse before COVID, and I did One More Chance by Biggie Smalls, the original, and that is a pretty lewd song, but I did do it, and I won hip hop karaoke. And I think that for me was really cool to kind of be like, hey, I can rap and people actually dig it. So if I have the flow, if I have the cadence, if I have that energy, then I can do my own stuff. And I've been writing music since I was a little kid. I just didn't want to say that because the school I went to, they didn't really encourage arts. And if you were an artist, you were a failure. You had to be in science, you had to be in this stuff. And it wasn't until, as I entered my 20s that I started reflecting more about what it is I liked. So I switched my degree in school, and I went into social arts and sciences, and I studied this, and it's that kind of information and all that knowledge that really informs my lyrics and my art practice. And I think too, like trying to understand who I was as a Pashtun person and understanding more of my culture instead of this like brainwash, whitewash sort of human I was at one point in my life. I used to identify as a Canadian. I don't do that anymore because I don't recognize the state of Canada. And so once I got through that, I was able to connect with my culture in a way that I understood that poetry is an act of resistance for me as a Pashtun, as an Afghan person. And it's important that I speak about my narrative in that way too, because I'm giving homage to my people, and I'm also being true to my insides and my soul. So that's kind of, I hope I answered your question. But that's kind of where that led me to.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. That's really clarifying and provides a lot of insight into not only the way that you're working, but the things that are driving you and motivating this work. Something that you said really struck me, which was this, I don't know if you would call it a pressure, but like this realization of, or this like writing happy lyrics, writing happy like lines. And what does it mean to feel that pressure when experiencing like the unhappiness of like, who is happiness for?
I mean, I do have happy moments in my music, and I do have witty moments in my music, but my Adidas song is all about feeling nice, looking good, and smashing the system, which is like, just like if I show up to a protest, I'm usually wearing Adidas. So the chorus goes, only hijabi on the mic in the three stripes. Yes, talk to me nice in the three stripes. I'll make you think twice in the three stripes. So that kind of thing is important for me to be like, yes, I do have those moments, but the reality is like, being a community organizer and seeing what's happening in the community, it's hard to write about all those happy things. I'd rather experience the happiness in those moments, and if they influence me in a way to inspire writing, for sure. But most of the time I find, at least for this album, maybe not for future ones, but for this album, I have a lot of pent up hurt, um, for being a young organizer in the city, for the amount of vitriol and violence I've faced. It's hard, trigger warning. It's hard to come back and bounce back from, being DM'd like death threats and rape threats and things like that. It's hard to see yourself differently when people are constantly telling you who you are. And so I think that that's a part of this piece too, is that it's okay that I have this sadness or this hurt, and this is a healthy way to express it, right? And people are going to feel that. And I think rap itself, the roots of rap and how it's come to be, is from that oppression, is from that want for liberation. It's from that kind of friction that this genre has been created. And there's so many different kinds of influences in rap. And so, I think the other thing is too, is that, when you listen to like commercial rap, I guess, not local rap, but things that are like, on the charts, like Drake and all that stuff, I guess you feel the pressure to write something that's similar to that. You know, I I can't do that because it's not me. And then you see a lot of these young rappers trying to mimic that kind of cadence. And even though I can, mimic a Biggie flow, that's not how I rap, because I need to find my own voice. And so I'm comfortable in knowing that I rap the way I rap because it's me. And so the other influencers in the rap genre can influence me and give me motivation and whatnot, but I'm never gonna copy that kind of rhythm, because I think the coolest thing about rap is so many people have different styles, and that's what makes it so beautiful and so diverse and all these things, because so many people have different flows that add to the beat. Um and so yeah, I think yeah, it doesn't have to be happy. I mean, it's not linear. I think there's some moments where in my music it sounds happy and then the next minute it's sad, right? And I think that that kind of intersection is real, is you can be happy and sad at the same time. I think that it's a huge reality. But the Wrath of Khan is like me putting it out there after bottling so much up for so long, and sharing parts of myself with my community that I've had a hard time, you know, expressing. And music is so beautiful for that, because it gives you that medium to express yourself, even though the world might want you to feel regretful for the ways that you're going about in your own lane. um, but I think there's something beautiful about following your path and listening to your soul and feeding it in that way. And yeah.
It's interesting how, like, you've talked a little bit about how Dal was a really hostile space and wasn't a community that supported you, quite the opposite, it was super violent, and how through poetry, through rap, you're able to establish and create community for yourself. Can you talk a little bit more about how expressing yourself, or how it's hard, like language doesn't support the ways that we form connections with people, and how we navigate disconnection and disruption or disruption. And so I guess, yeah, maybe reflect on like how you're being held within your communities and like local or larger than local rap communities.
Yeah, I'd say that the local rap community has been super supportive. There's so many people in the industry that have um, really pushed me in ways to be like, yo, Masua, go do that thing. Like, you need to go do it. Do your album, pitch this, do that. And I've been like, oh, baby, but it's people like Kayla Borden, shout out to Kayla, people like Courtney, people like Uncle Fester, DJ Uncle Fester, or Ambition and Ghetto Socks, and folks like that who have like really pushed me to do this kind of work. And I think too is like um even when sometimes like, oh, and also like Calvin Mansoray, who's an amazing artist and has we've had chats time and time again about art and what that looks like. And I was going to him and being like, hey, well, like, I feel like I'm missing the mark. Like, I feel like I'm not good enough. Like, what am I doing? I have this artist in residency. How am I going to do this? This is a real deal now. I can't walk away. And it was like, trying to hold me in those things like, hey Masuma, like if you only wrote 15 bars, well, maybe there's a pause there for a reason. Maybe your flow is like that for a reason, and maybe it's okay to only have sad music because that's how you're feeling. It's You don't want to be one of those artists that try so hard that you're not yourself anymore, right? Like, what is it you want to share in your music? Do you want to share yourself, or on or something else that's not you? And then if so, how do you ever think that you're actually going to be able to share something that's not you when you can't even attain that, right? um and I think Calvin has been like super sweet in that. And also like Andre Fenton, who's an author and a pal of mine, he he was talking to me the other day too, because I was like, hey Fenton, man, I don't know, like I feel like it's my I don't want to be called a woke rapper because that's the genre. And he was like, no, but we need that message, we need those conversations, we need to understand, we need people talking about that more. And for me, I think it's very clear in the ways in which my community organizing and my art are intersecting in this way, where I'm using my art as a means to educate people on what's happening. Because I find like organizing, yes, but it's that education piece. So if my art can also be an education piece to community, to help them in understanding how colonialism has impacted us, how white supremacy is a global phenomenon and how it's impacting the globe. And understand, what it means to be a displaced Afghan person here, and growing up here. That's important stuff, and we need that. And Fenton was so good for saying that to me, because I needed to hear that in that moment. And then I thought, hey, I'm not a woke rapper, I'm a conscious rapper. I'm my own genre, and that's okay. Because the reality is people, if everyone sounds the same, no one's going to want to listen to you, right? And I sound different, and that's what's going conscious, that's what's going to have that appeal, is that I don't sound like everyone else on the radio. And the lyrics that I spit and kick are not like everyone's lyrics. I'm not talking about, going to the club or whatever. um I have a verse that says, you won't catch me at no toothy moose, but you'll catch these hands and knock your head loose. So I'm not gonna sell myself for something that I'm not. I'm gonna be myself authentically, and all my flaws and all the things that I am. Um, and so that kind of having that community to hold you together, and then your lyrics, like, you're always worried about if you're sharing too much, if you're being too vulnerable. But like sometimes I read my lyrics and I'm like, yo, that's it right there. I would bump too. Like I want to hear stuff like that, right? So yeah, holding myself in that is really beautiful. And like also like starting the recording process has been really helpful for me too, because for a while, because I've been wanting to do music for so long, but having so many barriers. So I'm so thankful for CFAT for supporting me in this endeavor, because I wouldn't be able to do this without them. So thank you, CFAT, so much. Because I was having so many barriers. I didn't have money to do the project. I didn't have the support, the space, the, you know, the need. They weren't being met. So it's really nice to have that. But I had been working on music for so long, but not putting anything out, just writing stuff and keeping it in a book, writing stuff, keeping it in a book. And then I started to dabble in spoken word. But rapping has always been my passion. And to be honest, like one of the first music videos I remember is a Busta Rhymes video. Put your hands with, and like I those kinds of things, like my brother's influence in music and my sister's influence in music, so like hip hop and R&B have shaped me. And I think too is important to recognize is that, as a displaced Afghan person, and the only access to like seeing racialized people in mainstream media and like music is like, I have to be honest and give my thanks to the Black community for making that space and making like accessible media where I could see someone that wasn't white and was doing music and like giving us different beats and rhythms that also fed my soul. So it's really important to recognize that. And so um yeah, all those things, I think the disconnect and the connecting, they happen constantly, and I don't think that that's ever going to stop.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned earlier in your talk, you talked about how there's like maybe two Muslim women rapping, or, and how that representation is changing and how you're looking to Black music cultures and communities for representation or for like kinship. Like, I think sometimes people take it as quite self-evident or a little bit glib of like, white supremacy, that the proliferation of a very mainstream popular culture that centers whiteness. But like, what are some of the reasons that we like might only have two Muslim women rappers? You talked a little bit about barriers, but I wonder if you can expand on like how challenging it is when you don't see yourself in a culture.
Yeah. Um it's very challenging. Um but it's good. It's good to make that space, but yeah, so some of the reasons I think why you don't see many visibly Muslim MCs, um like hijabi MCs, is because oftentimes the community, Muslim community, holds you back. And it's because there's patriarchy in all of our communities. Like Islam, the Muslim community isn't absolved from it. The indigenous community isn't absolved from it. All of us racialized communities aren't absolved from patriarchy. It exists everywhere. And oftentimes, growing up, when I went to Islamic schools in the city, um, the amount of spiritual abuse that they kind of inflicted upon us as children, kind of being like, oh, you can't do that, you're gonna go to hell, right? Anything you do that doesn't follow our narrative, you're gonna go to hell. um and when I had to go public with my story, and everyone was, all a bunch of the Muslim community members, they would stop my dad in the mosque and be like, oh, you need to teach your daughter how to speak. And he was like, excuse me, like, teach my daughter how to speak? She's the bravest person in the world. All of you are cowards. You can say half the things that she said, right? And, my dad's telling me this. So, that's a heartwarming moment between me and my father. But also to think about the kind of disrespect that my dad would take for just me existing as myself is those kinds of things. Because in the Muslim community, it's always, what's this person going to say? Oh, they're going to talk about you. I really don't give a damn who talks about me, because I am who I am. I'm not hiding. I can't do it anymore. I cannot stop my art practice just because a few Muslims think that, um, that makes me a bad Muslim. Well, the reality is my religion, in Islam, the most beautiful thing I find about Islam is that you have a direct connection to your creator, and no entity can come between that. So whether I'm a good Muslim or not, that's between me and God, and no one can tell me otherwise, right? So um I think that there's a lot of pressure in the Muslim community. A lot of people often feel like you have to fit these like gender norms too. And I find too, being a hijabi MC, I feel like you're feminine, but you also have this like mask energy a little bit, and people feel uncomfortable with that. Doesn't fit this linear narrative. But the reality for me is that um, you know, I don't think that hijabis necessarily have to fit into that binary. We can be however we want. And I think it's important too to recognize that like Muslim women are the backbone of Muslim communities. So like if we want to rap, we should be able to rap. And I think it's important for me to do this because I was like, oh, I don't see myself, blah, 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 blah. There's gonna be some little cute little Muslim kid being like, damn, I wanted to write about stuff like this too, right? And so I think that it's important for me to do this because I want um you know, hijabis or Afghans or whoever it is, brown, young people, people from the diaspora to see this and be like, yeah, I can do that too. I can actually keep my own voice in this narrative and pay respects, you know? And I think it's important too to say like, if you're just like if anyone watches this because it's recorded, I think it's important for me to say too that if there's any young artists watching this, that it's important for us as like non-black folks to respect the genre we're in and also pay homage and also understand the lines, the barriers of where we're at and what is disrespectful. So no, you will never catch me saying the N-word in a rap. That's not my space. I'm never going to talk about black experience because that's not my experience. My space in rap is to talk about my experience and to connect that to the greater culture, but to not take up that much space that I'm saying, oh, this is mine. I know where rap came from. I understand where rap came from. And so it's also my duty um, to respect that. And I think too, is just hard for Muslim women to do anything because I thought about this for a while. It's like, oh, if I do music, I used to tell people I can't do music, I'll get too much hate. I deal with enough hate. I can't deal with white supremacists getting at me for my lyrics. That's going to be really hard. I don't know how I'm going to take that. But then I started thinking to myself, I'm like, Masuma, you can just breathe and they'll take issue with that. So why are you stopping yourself from expressing what you need to? And so I took that leap. I made my Instagram public. I'm like, oh no. But even then, like I haven't put out any videos of me rapping yet. Those are coming out soon. And I just got hit up today for a documentary around my albums. Like, a community member wants to do a documentary about my process and all this stuff. So that's great. And I think it's hard for Muslim women to exist in anything, whether you rap, whether you're a mother, whether you breathe, whether you are, a professional person, a lawyer, what have you, especially if you're a visible Muslim in some way. Um, you deal with a lot of violence, and it's hard. It's really hard. Um, and so I think that that's probably why there's less. But I'm hoping, my dream is for a time where hijabis across the globe will feel comfortable rapping, singing, doing whatever it is they want to do musically, artistically, and be able to have that agency in feeding their soul. Yeah.
It strikes me that the album is going to be a document of, as you said, a process. I think sometimes there's this emphasis on artworks, albums included, that they should be these finite, polished things that kind of don't move or don't grow. are really static, and the way that you're talking about your process and your practice and like learning and constantly moving and shifting, I think like it sounds as though the album will be a really beautiful like living thing. And I'm also struck by the ways that as we've like had gone through this conversation, you're destabilizing certain really restrictive and prescriptive narratives around gender roles, even things sounds like decolonizing like work, not pushing or like allowing yourself to engage in writing 16 lines or verses without pressure of it that it should be good, returning to work, working cyclically instead of linearly. Yeah, do you want to reflect a little bit more on the ways that you're sort of like in your work through practice, destabilizing some of these things?
Yeah, well, I definitely say that the Wrath of Khan is like a whole attack on white supremacists because like most of my subject matter I think destabilizes uh like normative narratives. Um so I think like I destabilize the ways in which people view Muslim women. I destabilize the ways in which people view Afghan people and the history of Afghanistan. A lot of people, when they think about Afghans, they think of them as like this failed state, this failed country, anything for themselves. And I talk about my family history and how my ancestors fought off the British and then ended up in being imprisoned by the British. And that's how I ended up here in Jabuktuk. Is a long displacement through colonialism. And my take on that is definitely disrupting the narratives that you hear around Afghanistan. Um, Disrupting the narratives of what a Muslim family looks like. And I think that that's important too, because when I was a young kid, in this community, in the Muslim community, at least, like people really harmed me for my parents being separated, which I thought was really ridiculous. How grown adults would come to a 7-year-old and be like, "Are your parents separated?" Like, yo, that's not your place. And I would never do that. And I'm not even as grown as they were at that time. So, um, those kinds of narratives of like destabilizing the ways in which people view um, Muslim families, how they view this territory. Specifically, I talk about how Mi'kmaq people never surrendered their sovereignty, and decolonization is a consistent theme. Border imperialism is a consistent theme. Um, so all these narratives are destabilizing all these global systems. I talk about capitalism. Um, I have a bar that goes something like, capitalism makes you think that your life is a commodity. Economy is killing us daily. I'm talking grand larceny, right? So we're talking about trying to connect for the listener to understand these different things. And I also have a song called POV, which stands for point of view. Um, and it's basically, it takes the listener through like, oh, you say this and we have a different point of view. And so you have many different intersectional layers to you and all this stuff. So, you know, what does that look like in coming together? And even though we have different points of view, how can we connect, right? Um, and I think that too is like often uh when people talk about um just this world is kind of like a right or wrong situation. And I think that it's important for people to understand that, a lot of us have been um really indoctrinated into this narrative of capitalism is great, liberalism is great, and Canada is great, and all these things are great. But the reality is that it's not. and globally it sucks, and we are causing all these issues. So it's important for me to have these conversations with my listeners or my community, to be like, hey, like, have you thought about this though? Have you thought about the ways in which you're accessing this? Have you thought about how we need to get rid of cops, how we need to get rid of prisons, how we need to get rid of these fake border, like, do you, in the song I say, do you believe in border lines and fascist governments? Like, do you believe in that? Do you believe they exist? Because I want to have this conversation with people who are listening to my project, because like I said before, I think that this piece of work and rap for me is an act of resistance. So this piece of work is an act of resistance in the music scene, to just kind of float and exist out there as some sort of consciousness, some sort of consciousness, yeah, so that folks can understand where I'm coming from. Another part of this too is destabilizing the narrative that people have of me. And I think that through my time at Dell, I felt that I, even when I did media, they only kept the parts that they wanted, and the narrative that was um, kind of shared of me was like this. Masuma Khan with the red smoke on the coast. And that kind of narrative was the way that everyone was seeing me. And that's fine. I look great with the red smoke behind me. But I think the reality too is to destabilize the ways in which people dehumanize me. And I see this project as a means of humanizing myself and sharing those vulnerable pieces, even though it might be so difficult to do that. I'm willing to do that because it's really important for me, because I've been fed this narrative. Um, I have this line in one of my songs where I say, alter my ego to hide my face, because the only place that I felt safe in the city at one point was alter egos. And I felt like I had to alter my ego to hide my face, because my face was being circulated. People knew who I was. I didn't know who people, to this day, people like, oh, you're, and I'm like, I don't know who I am anymore. Right. So I think that it was important for me to destabilize that narrative, because I'm not what people think I am. I'm more complex than that. I'm more deep than that. I'm not just this loud-mouthed, ungrateful student. I'm an alumni now, and I'm an artist. I'm a community organizer. I'm a daughter. I'm a friend. I'm a sister. I'm many things. I hold space for a lot of people. I work with youth. I care about my community, and I care about people understanding um, those pieces, because I think it's important for us to have conversations about why we need to get rid of police, right? Why the police system is messed up, why we're dealing with systemic racism. Um why is it that we still don't have clean water, in Flint? Why is it that, still so many indigenous communities in so-called Canada don't have access to clean drinking water? Why is it that people are mad that Mi'kmaq people are defending their treaty rights, and people feel more entitled to this land than the people of this land who sprouted from this land, right? And so trying to share the pieces I know and destabilizing all these things, and kind of, I what I hope is that whoever listens to my project um is able to feel that wrath of Khan, and also understand why I feel that way, and why I feel so stuck in many things, and um feel angry. And I think too is like my anger has been so um my anger has been what's the word for that? It's it's basically, people have told me that it's unjustified and it's been devalued. And I think anger is a valuable thing, because your anger is the part of you that recognizes when something's wrong, when your needs aren't being met. So, you know, if someone isn't loving you the way that you want, that anger you feel is the part of yourself loving yourself enough to tell you that, hey, you deserve better. So for me, I think it's really important to talk about that anger too. And I feel like a lot of the times people stereotype Afghans as very angry people. Um, and so that's why the title and the want to share those pieces, because I think that anger is transformative. It's educational, and it's also a conversation to have, and it can be a good conversation. You can have anger and not be screaming. And so that's the kind of, yeah, those are the pieces that I thought of when you asked me that.
Thank you. That's really such a beautiful, nuanced answer. It really struck me when you were talking about the violence of dehumanization that goes along with like racism or Islamophobia, for example, like that dehumanization is something that is internalized and can be like a form kind of annihilation if it's not dug out. And so it sounds like this album is really an opportunity to dig that out and to process that and like release that. And to not be a two-dimensional flattened thing that hate or that dehumanization renders you. Um, that's a really beautiful breaking point, I think. And so maybe just mindful that it's around the 7-minute mark, maybe we can take a break now and everyone, including ourselves, can have a stretch and a little break. And then maybe we can come back at shortly after 7:05 and we can open the floor to conversation if that feels good for you.
Yeah,
Cool.
sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so folks, let's take a break. It's 7:01 on my clock. Let's come back at 7:06 and then we can open questions to the floor. Okay, so we'll just give people 10, 15 seconds to come back and return. So if folks have questions for Masuma, you can either, well, the best thing is probably to stick it in the chat, or you can turn your camera on, raise your hand, and we can start taking like a speakers list. Just, okay.
I'd also, apologies to interrupt, I just want to add that if folks aren't feeling comfortable with asking themselves, you are more than welcome to private message me or just message in the chat.
Thanks, Courtney. So maybe to get us started while people type in their messages to Courtney or into the chat or raise their hand, whatever, I would love to maybe return to something that you said, Masuma, about how, success is this narrative, like that liberalism is great and capitalism is great and being a Canadian is great. And when we start destabilizing and like taking apart those notions and the attachment to those values and ideologies, how do we find happiness? How do we find success outside of these dominant narratives of what success is?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question. But I think I can speak for myself in saying that it's a daily practice destabilizing those things. I think capitalism is like this weird seed in your mind that sometimes you're like, oh, I got it, and then like another like capitalism dandelion pops up and you're like, oh, you weren't productive, like getting mad at yourself because you worked all day and then you couldn't do music. Like those things are fine. Those things are, they're okay, because then often I find they just end up being turned into art where you're like writing music about how you're so tired you can't even do what you love. um and destabilizing those narratives are, I think, important for art, because I find the way that we view art in places like so-called Canada is a very colonial way of looking at art, in a colonial way. Like, I'm no Beethoven or what have you, and I think at the same time, like, I think that those kinds of hierarchies that are in art need to be dismantled, because, like, if you look at organizations like Music Nova Scotia, you'll find that there's a lot of conversations that have been had around racism and the ways that they only support certain types of music, and how their urban genre is essentially just like Black folks. And it's like very weird the ways in which people are navigating themselves, especially like in Nova Scotia, which is like a place that's been a home to specifically like Mi'kmaq African Nova Scotian people, and how they're not supported in the music industry. And so I think it's important to destabilize those things consciously and constantly. And I think that it gets tiring because you feel and you deal with backlash for not fitting into that narrative. But I think that the best musicians, the ones that I love the most, at least, they were always the first of their kind. And that kind of uniqueness that you bring to being your own person um, is an important thing, because you destabilize this narrative of like, oh, you have to look like a Kardashian, oh, you have to look like, have all this stuff done to you, or I don't know, I just don't fit that narrative. I can't. I used to try to, but it was only harming myself, and it got to a point where it made me sad. um and so it's important for me to destabilize these things, because it actually makes me happy, and it makes me feel like my music is actually having an impact on community through having these conversations. Yeah.
World making.
Yeah.
When you abandon that world and you let go of that, you can make totally. Courtney, has anyone sent you any messages? Any questions?
I have not seen any questions yet. Oh, I see one from Lauren Bauer. Not a question, but I just wanted to say thanks so much for sharing your story with us today and reminding us how important it is to continue destabilizing these harmful narratives. It can feel like a daunting task at times, and your encouragement and work towards that is really important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do.
Are there, as listening to Courtney talk about or to share Lauren's comment, are there ways that you're collaborating with people on this album? You gave a shout out earlier to a lot of different musical artists, MCs, authors, and I'm wondering how you're pulling people into this project.
So pulling people into, well, basically, I don't know. I'm like, how do I know Fester? Well, I came into the music scene through alter egos. Everything happens at alter egos. Shout out to alter egos. I did that at a different podcast I was doing. I kept saying shout out to alter egos because many great things happen there. It's a beautiful community space and a music space. But I got introduced to these local rappers, and I guess I didn't really pay any attention to it. But folks, like, they used to have this thing before COVID called Beats and Brunch, and Fester would come and play beats, and he produces too, right? And he's been part of DJs for Sip Set, which is like a local rap group here. And you know, he was really kind enough to be like, hey, I was like, Fester, I think I want beats. And he was like, hey, here you go. Here's some beats for you to choose. He's like, what kind of beats do you like? I'm like, boom bap beats. That's the kind of thing that fits my soul. And so he sent me some. And then Ambition, he's like really great. He is a dope rapper himself and an amazing producer. And he's been really kind to me too, because what I see is the need for me to be in these spaces and the need for my narrative to be out there. And so these two producers have been like very supportive in my musical process, and have been really kind in giving me access to their space and recordings and stuff like that, to help me get this project off the ground. So my whole album is just basically, most of the beats are from Ambition, and you can follow him at This Is Ambies on Instagram. And then Fester's Instagram is, I'm just looking it up right now, Fester 902. He makes amazing beats, and one of my beats is his beat, and that's my Three Stripe song. That's the Adidas track that I wrote. I have a few more of his beats, but they're just not on this project. Ambition makes really great beats, and I think that he's a great producer, and people really need to support his work and give him credit for it, as well as Fester. And yeah, I think that it's just really great to be surrounded by music people that really motivate you and believe in you, and like um give you that feedback. And that's the thing that I was most scared about, was feedback. Like, how am I going to take this feedback? Am I going to feel like crap? Am I what? And to be honest, like, I was also, it's also scary to come into a very like very masculine space too. Like rap, I find at least in this city is like run by a bunch of dudes. But luckily I was able to find in a group where these dudes like have like good understandings of like sexism and patriarchy, and like don't talk over me and respect me and all these things, and like respect who I am as a human. And so that's really nice, because when I get that feedback, I actually get feedback that helps me become a better artist. Because, you know, to think that this is the climax of where I'm at is wrong, right? It's the beginning, it's a new journey. It's just the tip of the iceberg, and I think that there's so much more depth and things that I will learn about myself, and just the ways that art practice shift and change and grow with you. um so I'm really thankful for folks like that. And of course, like Ghetto Socks, he's a friend of mine, and he's just always been so supportive about getting into music. And two other music people is Kayla Borden, DJ Transition, and DJ Five Rivers. So Nivi Singh and Kayla Borden have been two people that have like really motivated me and pushed me and been like, nah, Suma, you need to do this. Like, you sit there and you write lyrics, like what are you doing with them? Like, come on, come freestyle, come to this freestyle battle. And like, I wouldn't go up, but I went, but I wouldn't go up and freestyle. So like, they've been slowly nudging me in this like very sibling way. And I think it's also really great to find support from like queer and femme musicians who believe in your voice and see the work that you do. And I think that, you know, it's fun to do that kind of stuff. And another project that I'm working on alongside with the Wrath of Khan, that's basically got most of my attention, and I'm working on recording that right now. But something else I'm working on is called Fob Ties, which means fresh off the boat. So Fob Ties, it's a EP that I'm gonna do with another rapper in the city. His name is Paulo. He's Lebanese, I'm Afghan, and both of our parents were immigrants to, or newcomers to Jabuktuk. Um, and you know, we were talking about how both of our families own corner stores or restaurants or pizza shops. And so we have one song that we're working on called Corner Stores, Pizza Shops, and Restaurants. And you know, we talk about, you know, it's a 16 per person, right? And we talk about our different narratives, and his experience is very different than mine. Because you know, in our corner store that we had, we dealt with a lot of Islamophobia after 9/11. And so I find even in that, disrupting those kinds of norms in that project, um, with Paulo, because, you know, he has a lot of happy memories and I have happy ones, but I also remember the really bad ones where they, you know, people were coming into our corner store and asking us where we were hiding Osama, you know, things like that. And so, or like like our corner store was set on fire multiple times, broken into multiple times. You know, it's that kind of violence needs to be processed. So that's the another project that I'm working on.
I have a question from the chat. Oh, it looks like we have a couple now. One from Taylor asking, or just saying, thank you so much for being here. Your story is amazing. I was wondering how we can hear this album when it comes out and how we can keep up with your work.
I was muted. So if you want to follow me on Instagram at I am General Khan, you will be able to follow up with me and see what I'm up to. It's basically a mix of my like art and community organizing stuff that I do. But I believe my music, once it releases, will be available on Bandcamp. I'm gonna have it streaming on every platform, but Bandcamp is a really great platform because it literally puts money into artists' pockets and actually supports artists, other than Spotify, which is this great big colossal capitalist thing, and there's like a whole algorithm to streaming, and that's all good and well and whatever, but I'm definitely going to have my stuff on Bandcamp before it hits other streaming devices or systems or platforms, just so I can hit those algorithms, but also get paid for my work. I'm also going to be releasing some merch, so hopefully some t-shirts, and maybe a run of vinyls. Who knows? Because there's some dope beats on this album, I have to say. So it's always nice to get those on vinyl. And vinyl are so cool, you know? It's just nice. They're expensive, but damn, it's worth it. So yeah, that's what I have to say for that. I see this other question from Sanad. Hi, thank you so much for being here. I was wondering if you experienced any difficulty entering your music practice. You mentioned that you always enjoyed and wrote your music your whole life, but when it came to pursuing it now, were you faced with any intimidation? Yeah. Yeah, it's intimidating. Yeah, it really is. And I think I've faced intimidation in many different ways, just like what's your community gonna say, or what are they gonna feel about it? What kind of hate are you gonna get for it? What are people gonna think when you say what you say? And are they, gonna think that you're talking about them? I think that that kind of intimidation comes with the space of just not fitting into a norm. Is That's how norms exist, is they want to intimidate you. So working on resisting that intimidation is hard work, but it's possible, and it's not perfect. Like some days I'm like, yes, it's me, General Khan, deal with it. Other days I'm like, oh no, it's me, General Khan. So like that anxiety comes, it flows, it ebbs and flows. um, just like, full moon cycles. Like 1 minute I'm a new moon, then I'm a full moon, then I'm just like, I'm don't even exist anymore. I'm just a little crescent, thin line, no capacity. But I think that that intimidation is a motivator, because I actually get a kick out of doing things that scare me a little. And I think if you don't have those kind of nerves, then you're not doing things that you should be, because those nerves sometimes, that little giddy feeling, it's like, before a big action, I feel that kind of intimidation and nervousness, because I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen. But the truth is that after that's over, I always feel great and being like, oh, all these amazing things happened. So I'm trying to challenge that intimidation and not let it intimidate me, but motivate me to do better. And to also be that vulnerable in my music, to be like, yeah, yo, I am intimidated and I do get sad and things are pretty messed up in the world, but I'm going to keep going and I'm going to just be myself.
Can I just received a private message. Can I share that now?
Yeah, of course.
Great. So coming back to the title of this session and the aspect of grant or funding rejections, what advice might you have for artists who are looking for support, but who find arts councils and funding groups or artist residencies who don't seem to support financially their work? And then a sub-question for this is, you mentioned Music Nova Scotia. Do you feel that overall these organizations are starting to do the work to be better at dealing with our colonial system?
No, Music Nova Scotia is I'm just gonna be honest, because Music Nova Scotia is a shame to the music industry in this province. Um, and they just like shared a thing of mine. I'm doing a merge festival this weekend, but I don't follow them. I won't apply to be one of their artists. I'm not interested in engaging in a relationship with them, with the ways in which I've seen them actively harm community members and tokenize Black community members. And they hired another white ED, so it's not like they're getting better. Most of their staff are white. There's no one that looks like me. Anytime I've gone into Music Nova Scotia, they don't say hi. They don't acknowledge me. I don't exist to them. So they don't exist to me. Grant writing, yeah, it sucks. It's terrible. And the arts councils are like, I used to go to the Youth Art Connections program called the Hub, which is also not the greatest. At least it's run by a Black community member, but they don't get all the support that they deserve. We had this like grant writing and these funding things, and all these people came in with like different I guess kinds of projects that they could support and fund. And I went to all these 3 different people that were on the panel, and no one could fund my project. Not one person. And I was like floored, and it made me feel bad as an artist, because I was like, how am I supposed to do this? I don't understand how they expect me. Like, I want to do music, but the program I'm going to doesn't support my work. And then these other like art things don't support new artists. It's like you have to be established before they want to give you money. And even then, I find that they devalue your worth. And so when I heard about this CFAT, artist in residency, I was kind of like, I'm not gonna get it. Like, why? I don't understand why. And one of my pals was like, no, just apply, just do it, you know. Ambition was like, just do it, just try, you know. Worst thing that happens is you don't get it. So I think that that's a piece of advice, is like, if you are interested in something and it piques your interest, like, you should apply for it. The worst case is that you don't get it. You have an outline for a proposal, you can use that for another one. Like, the worst case is that you are prepared for it, you know. And oftentimes, if you write to those people and ask them why it is that they didn't fund your project or what, I think that most of the time is they give you that feedback back. So it's important to also engage with these organizations or councils about that kind of feedback. Like, okay, like, what are you looking for? What was missing in my project? So that the next year when that funding comes, and you can apply for that and make sure that you hit those pieces. I would really encourage people to apply for CFAT's artist in residency. I found I was like, yeah, I'm having a great time. I feel valued. I feel supported. I feel important. I feel like I can get this done. I feel like an actual artist. And that's a weird thing for me to say, is like, I would always be like, I'm not an actual artist, but like, I genuinely feel like I'm an artist, and I have a title, and I feel good about myself. And the great thing about CFAT is like the kind of flexibility and understanding there is, and the kind of anti-oppressive like lens that they apply. And the environment is just so much more welcoming. Whenever I come into CFAT, everyone says hi, meets me with a smile through their mask, of course. Other than these other programs. Yeah, you know, apply for grants. I'm going to start applying for more, because I think it's important to do that. I heard that Factor is good. Factor is a good place to apply for grants as new artists, and they have like different tiers. But yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to just add in here too, the first of all, that's amazing. I'm glad that you're feeling good here. And then secondly, I'd like to just add that person who asked that awesome question was Maureen. She did not mean to ask it anonymously, so just thought I'd give credit to Maureen for the awesome question. And then I'd also like to add that Carrie Allison, who is a CFAT member, is actually facilitating a BIPOC professional development workshop this Friday. It's titled Attempting to Create Safer Spaces in Arts Institutions, so it feels very relevant right now. I'm just gonna add it to the chat if anyone's interested in registering. It is a BIPOC space, so BIPOC folks, please feel free to look more into that.
Okay, so just a note that we're coming up on 7:30. Well, it's 7:32. If anyone has a burning question, there's time for maybe one more. into the chat or raise your hand and we can do that live even. But Masuma, thank you so much for your generosity and for sharing so much about your work and how you and your life and the interconnection between the two. I'm really enjoying this conversation.
Thanks for having me and asking me all these awesome questions. I really appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, I'm grateful. I love, this is an amazing conversation.
We have a question from Angel that says, this has been an incredible artist talk. Thank you so much for this and the work you do in our community. Could we hear a few bars of a poem or rap if you would like to share something with us? I also had a question. How has the process of starting this album felt during this really wild time where every day feels like a new crisis?
I'll answer the last one first.
I think Masuma froze. Yeah, okay. We'll wait.
Yeah, let's just give it a minute.
Am I good now?
We got you back.
Okay, great. Sorry, I think the internet kind of went out. I was saying, yes, COVID is wild, but I think that it kind of made the world feel like it slowed down for a minute. And it still kind of feels like that, even though Scotia's kind of back to normal, whatever that means. But it kind of gave me the moment to have some clarity and process those feelings around the crisis and those feelings of anxiety. It allowed me to ground myself in my work and give myself some comfort in such a uncomfortable time. So yeah, it was hard, but like I kind of started writing my album in February, and then COVID hit, and then it was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna write the rest of it. So I would just get Ambition to send me beats, and I finished writing all my lyrics right before the start of the artist in residency, which is pretty good for me in terms of timing, so I don't feel stressed. So now I'm in my recording part of my life now, which is so exhausting. I didn't know how exhausting recording would be, and you have to like bring all the energy. But yeah, thanks for asking me that question. And the other thing, could you share a few bars? I could do some poetry because well, I'll read it like a poem because I don't have the beats. But I can share. Da, 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 da. So also fun stories that I have like 200 notes in my draft of my album. That's how much writing I did to just take out 10 songs. Um, um, yeah. I'll do this one. This song is Liberation. They won't let us in. Damn doctrine of discovery, KKK, racist Christians, cardinal sin, genocide and violence, all due to the melanin in our skin. In this system, oppression is built in. Where do we begin and when will it end? Cause don't pretend, have these Nazis feeling baloo, haha, like I'm tailspin. Pain within us for generations. When will they give Flint water? Worry mothers for the children. HRP beat Santina in front of the kids, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Yes, we are kin and we won't stop till the charges are dropped. Lives on a game, cops play too much. Lives on a game, HRP plays too much. Let us in, liberation. That's kind of how that one goes. That's just like the first 16. And I have um this other song. It's kind of angry. It goes like this. Um General's flow will give it to you dirty and slow. Word up, a cab, so now you know. My truth is ruthless, my existence resistance. What of the day is persistence. Open sesame, I die for my legacies. Give it all I got till there's no heart left in me. Who gon' check for me and what is left for me? It's all gone. White supremacy did the globe harm. Who am I? And where's my mother tongue? It'll be your own brother that'll come for you. On God, I'm ready though. You about to learn today. What you reap is what you sow. Roosters come home to roost. Won't catch me at no toothy moose, but you'll catch these hands and knock your head loose. Oh, she lost a tooth, and him maybe too. Don't question me. This I had to do. Yeah, that's one of those 16s too. I don't know what that song's well, that song's called Change. I thought I hadn't titled it, but yeah.
Masuma, that's amazing. Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you so much. Maybe like that's perhaps the best note that we can end on. Thank you for sharing your rhymes, your poetry. Please, everybody join me in giving it up and thanking Masuma so much. Choose your favorite emoji, shake your screen, do the thing.
Yeah, please feel free to share and wave.
Yeah. Oh, look at all the nice emojis. That's so nice.
I am also sharing all of the Instagram accounts that Masuma just let us know about from some local folks who are amazing. So feel free to look at the chat and follow those people.
Amazing. Okay, I'll hand it back to you, Courtney. I don't know if you have any closing words.
Just thank you, Julie. Thank you, Masuma. Thank you to our amazing interpreters. We're so grateful for your services tonight. Thanks for everyone who came.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to leave my email in the chat here. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to email, and I'm going to close the group down in a couple minutes.